G'day everyone, welcome to a belated episode of the Keeping Watch podcast. It's proudly brought to you by TopSport, home of the best multis. We know that the regular suspects are here. I'm talking about Tristan Merlehan, the number one seed up there at TopSport. I'm talking about Bradley James Haddin, test player number 400 for Australia. How are we, gentlemen?
Morning all, everyone. Yeah, it's a belated show, but you know what? You'll blame me. I had obviously the funeral to attend, but I think the reason this show's late is I don't think Tristan's dealing with the downfall of the Gold Coast Titans, to be perfectly honest, with the ups and downs, and it's hard to get him in a good mood during the Titans game.
Oh, it was, g'day boys, good to chat, and yes, you're right. I have been dealing with that very, very poorly, and the thing that compounds the problem is when you got Jimmy giving you a score update every 5 minutes of how they're travelling and how his lunch bet's going and these sort of things. So yeah, it's been a tough old fortnight for the other Titans, and I'm not sure it's going to improve rapidly anytime soon.
Just on that, we're obviously fully aware of what the downs are. Could you explain the ups for the Gold Coast Titans? All right, Tino Fa'asuamaleaui's in the Queensland side. Hooray! I can't see too many ups for the Gold Coast TopSport Titans, but anyway, we better move past that. The beauty of it wasn't a home game, so that means that Mrs. Tristan wasn't there getting stuck into the free champagne and the TopSport lounge and threatening to run onto the field again. All right, it is a bit of a somber note that we start on. Again, this is just incredible. But Brad, yeah, you travelled up to Townsville for the service for memory of the life of Andrew Simons. Give us an understanding of how that was and who was there from a former teammate point of view, former opponent point of view.
Yeah, I tell you what, Jimmy, it is a wonderful send-off for Andrew Simons. The speeches were outstanding. You had even walking in, he had his crab pots there. His kids presented on top of his coffin and a kubra, and just the stories that came out. Jimmy Maher's eulogy was just spot on. There wasn't a dry eye in the place, and a smile as well. His mum spoke beautifully about his childhood. And it was a really great send off for Roy. You had Matthew Haddin did a great tribute from overseas, where he's still in the IPL. We know how close those two were, and a few of their fishing stories when their boat went under. So yeah, it was a great send off. You had who was it, Ponting, and had some wonderful stories. But to me, Jimmy Maher, the way he spoke about his mate, and then the one thing he summed up with Roy is, he was always your mate. He was always there through good and bad. You'd get the phone call. And those guys are just true friends. When it's under pressure, wherever you are, you always had a voice at the other end of the phone, just simplifying things and putting a smile on back in your face and putting things back in perspective.
Yeah, I think, and like just from an outside looking in, seeing the way it was covered over a number of the media outlets, and it is like, I think everyone summed it up exactly, where there was so many stories that raised that emotion, but then the smile at the same time. That's who Roy was from me, like not knowing him, but not knowing the way that he's carried himself both on the field and then in the commentary box. So yeah, it would have been an unbelievable few days up there, and I'm glad a lot of people got around there to see it.
Yeah, very sad situation with his family, most notably with his two children, quite obviously, but a celebration of a life well lived. So well done, everyone involved in that one. Interesting story broke last week. We had Malcolm Conn from the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Just had the top 17 contracted players. I know this happens every year, Brad, but it's always interesting to pull a curtain back on this type of thing. Clearly, he was leaked a document that he should not have been leaked, which is great journalism. But thoughts on that? The top 6 of them from New South Wales and the other one, the South African. So what was your take? What was your take on that list?
Yeah, I think it was a pretty predictable list, Jimmy. I think we've got a lot of cricket over the next year in white ball, so I think that reflected as well. An interesting contract for me was the second wicketkeeper, Josh Inglis. You've got Alex Carey, who's doing a great job in the one-day form of the game and test matches. But to put another keeper on, it means that they're having a close look at Inglis, that they're happy with what he's presenting. He's going on a lot of tours now, and I've been in that situation myself. So he'd be learning a lot, being on the road. But to put him on contract, it means that there's a bit of pressure on Alex Carey because they're looking at Josh Inglis quite closely. Carey's going well. I thought he had a really good series in Pakistan with the gloves, and he started to get his mojo a bit with the bat as well. Play that wicket-keeping style at number 7 where he counter-attacks and changes the momentum of the game. I thought he did a really good job there. But Josh Inglis on contract is going to put a bit of pressure on him over the next 12 to 18 months. So whether he can push Matthew Wade out of the 2020 spot with the gloves, because we've seen Inglis play a bit at number 3 as a batsman only. It was a leaked list, which is pretty predictable at this time of the year. I was surprised about the top 10 that there wasn't at least 9 New South Welshmen. We know when Australian cricket's strong, New South Wales cricket is flying. So, yeah, it's a pretty predictable but strong list. That let's hope we can get some more silverware in our cupboards with the 2020 Home World Cup with the defending champs there. Then a big series in India with the 50 over World Cup.
Yeah, and I think you're right there with that Josh Inglis one, and I think it probably just gives a little bit of flexibility in that squad, because we all know some of the players that are currently contracted are closer to the end of their career than the start. So you just don't know how they're going to be shaping up in 12 or 6 or 9 months' time when these big tournaments roll around, and particularly that Matt Wade situation, where he obviously performed very, very well in the last World Cup, but we've still got a little while there. So I think having Inglis in that squad really gives you a bit of a backup or an option depending on how things are travelling. So, yeah, but 9 out of 10 New South Wales in the top 10. We'll see if it can happen next year.
The rise of Josh Hazlewood too up the rankings, Bradley, which is probably reflective of his white ball cricket, most notably away from Australian colours and doing it in the IPL.
Yeah, that's true where the rankings are. He didn't play a lot of Test cricket this year.
Yeah.
He missed a lot of the summer. I think Josh Hazlewood, he's that rock-solid performer, isn't he? No matter what form of the game he'd be ranked high in all 3. But you talk about the IPL, and then there's debate, should you send players and should you not? 2 seasons ago, Josh Hazlewood wasn't in calculation for our Whiteboard 2020. He went away, had an outstanding IPL 2 seasons ago in the UAE. He was star for us off the back of that in winning that 2020 World Cup. So there's all debates about, do you send your players? Do they get too tired? But Josh Hazlewood example there, he's gone over there. He's upskilled himself. And he's been outstanding this white form, the game. And you look at the IPL as well, Jimmy, in the top 10 batters and bowlers, he's the only Australian in the top 10 in the bowlers. I think he's 6th with 20 wickets from 12 games. So, yeah, it's a predictable list. You've got Camo up the top, obviously, being captain, and how well he plays in all forms, the role he plays in all forms. You got your Warner, Smith, Marnus, the GOAT's right up there, and he only plays one form of the game, but he is as important to anyone to this Australian team with what he does with his off spinners. So, yeah, I like the list.
Bit of news around the scheduling of the Australian summer, talking about Perth getting the first test match, getting it in November. That means that they're getting primetime cricket into the eastern states, which is obviously what they're looking at, and then backing it up with the Adelaide test. So that's back-to-back primetime cricket, which is interesting. Before that, lots of cricket to be played, including this tour of Sri Lanka, Brad. Now, I know you're interested in chatting this and the challenges that Australia is going to face there.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting tour. On paper, Australia should dominate the tour. We're playing really well in the subcontinent after the back of a lot of confidence, I'd imagine, out of the Pakistan win. There's a player I'm interested. He played for RCB, Hassarenga. He's a leg spinner. He's the leading wicket taker in the comp going into the last game. He got 26 wickets in the IPL. He's just starting to come on the scene now. He bowls very similar to Rashid Khan. He's predominantly a white ball player. And to start this tour, you've got a 20 over, 320 matches and 5 one-day games as well. I'd imagine if he does well there, and the wickets you'd imagine they're preparing in Sri Lanka for the Test series will turn and offer a lot to the spinners. That if he does well in those games, it wouldn't be surprised if we see him roll out in the Test match against Australia. So we will have a look at that, Tristan. You might be able to give us some numbers on what he'll be for leading wickets taker or to play in the Test match series. But have a close look at Hasaranga. He's going to be an interesting one this tour and a big player for Sri Lanka.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think having that ace up their sleeve of trying someone new, I think Sri Lanka are probably in the need of revitalising their Test side in particular and finding a couple of these young kids that can move forward. So they were in a little bit of trouble against Bangladesh, but they bounced back and ended up having a 10-wicket win there a couple of days ago. But just watching the live betting, it turned on its head when they rolled Bangladesh in that second innings. But I think there's a few things there. Bringing in a bit of new blood might help.
Yeah, I think a guy like that, though, to play him against Australia, it's that attacking mindset. You want to play guys like that who, if they're on, they can win you a game. And Sri Lanka can't go into this series against Australia. How are we going to survive? If they do, Australia will eat them up. They're fast bowlers. I think will dominate the series. I think that's where Australia are going to have the big upside with Stark, Cummins, Hazelwood, whether he plays. But I think fast bowling will play a big part in the match. So someone like Hasaranga could be just a little diamond in the rough because he's so attacking and aggressive. And if he does get on a roll, he can win your game. And that's the mindset Sri Lanka need to be competitive.
How am I going to survive? That's my mindset when I go for a beer on a Friday night with Brad Haddin. So there you go. It's interesting the way that can be taken on by an international cricket side. But I want to talk a little bit of coaching now, gents. Daniel Vettori added to the squad as an assistant coach to Andrew McDonald. What does Dan Vettori bring, Brad, in your mind?
Cricket IQ, Jimmy.
Right.
He's obviously a very talented cricketer in his own right. But the one thing that always drew me to Daniel Vettori was the way he thought about the game. He was a left arm off spinner that didn't turn the ball a great played on the small grounds in New Zealand, but he was really good at his craft of understanding on how to get batsmen out, massaging momentum swings in games. So I think he's a really good addition to Andrew McDonald's staff as well, because you got Nathan Lyon who we know is world class, and he'll have someone now to bouncing ideas off. But we also need to educate the next group of spinners coming through. Nathan Lyon's not going to be there for forever. So to have someone like Dan Vettori's cricket IQ around, I think that'll complement Andrew McDonald's staff. And I know Andrew and Daniel obviously very close, and he's an honest shooter too, Vettori, about what he sees in the game. So I think he'll complement Dan Vettori in that respect. Do I like seeing Australians coach Australian teams? 100%. 100% you like to see as many Australians in the setup as possible. But I think with Vettori, I think he will add something to the environment, and that's all you want from your coaching staff.
And I think we touched on with Brendan McCullum there last episode when he took that side in New Zealand to a higher level when he was there, and they've obviously evolved from that. And I think Daniel Vettori and Stephen Fleming did something similar, in the earlier days. So I think getting the best out of your player's ability and knowing your limitations, which I think is what Dan did very, very well, because I modelled my cricket career on Dan Vettori. I bowled left arm off spin, wore the glasses. I just didn't have anywhere near the success as he did. So it just shows that non-spinning left arm slow bowling isn't always as effective as what Dan made it out to be.
I hope they were just patting you back down the wicket with a bit of respect there for the number one seed at TopSport. Now, you like having Australians coach Australian teams. What about former Australian coaches and their ability or lack thereof to move on from a given situation? We had last week Justin Langer in a keynote address, no less, describe it as quote unquote bullshit politics that made it difficult for him to be able to perform his job when coach of Australia. Thoughts on JL and his comments last week, Bradley?
Yeah, it was interesting, Jimmy. I think the most interesting couple of points out of that is one, that there's still a lot of anger there with the way it was handled. And we seen that in Justin's presentation. That was a keynote speaking engagement he was at. So that was planned. That wasn't a camera thrown in your face. So I think what I got out of it, there's still a lot of rawness there around the communication on how that was handled and how that was finished at the end. And I don't think we're going to hear the end of it. I think now Justin will have the opportunity to give his side of the story, and it was pretty brutal too in his attack towards Cricket Australia and the way it was handled. So yeah, I don't think it's the last we're going to hear of this.
I'll put it this way, and look, I've had my say in it a fair bit with Justin Langer, for what it's worth. You obviously know he and the situation a lot closer than I do. And if everyone wants to question the manner in which it was handled by Cricket Australia, then absolutely so. I'm still waiting for those people to come out and say what a great coach Justin is, whether it's former teammates or indeed players that played under him. And I will, again, speculate around what are the current players, Australian players, thinking when they see something like that and they go, wow, it's getting nuclear, and thank heavens we're away from that situation. I'm not going to ask you to comment on that, Brad, but that's my take on it as well.
Yeah, I think with that one, I think from a player's point of view that they've had players move on pretty quick from these sort of events because they have to. The reality of professional sport, you see it a lot in rugby league now. Coaches can change weekly, actually, in the NRL, but the players have to move on. I think from their point of view that they'd be disappointed to hear it. But and Justin, from his point of view, he's obviously, as I said, still angry. He's I don't know whether that's the right forum to air your grievances. I dare say he would have had some pretty heated conversations with Cricket Australia. So yeah, it's just interesting to me that it came out in a presentation that was obviously a planned, a planned event.
I think what's so vital now for as you say, players have to move on very, very quickly. And obviously now the results are going to be what determine, how the public mentality, because there's been so many different points of views. But the last thing I want as a neutral Aussie cricket fan is you just don't want, the perception that we're death riding or those sort of things, because that's almost like it feels like now that there's some people out there that want to see the team fall over and to vindicate or justify, which is just not the mentality. And these sort of comments don't do anything to help that.
Yeah, I think the players did really well is that they dealt with it when they had to. And I thought Paddy Cummins spoke outstanding. How he presented himself. They obviously had their say about what went on, but you can only judge the players on their behaviour when they get on the field now. And I thought what they did, and Andrew McDonald with the team in Pakistan, was a really gutsy and well-planned win. They said at the start of that campaign, this is going to be a test series that's won in the last few days. You're not going to win this. It's not a sprint. And I think the one thing the Australian players have done well, they've moved on with the way they performed. And that's the most important thing. That's the currency for this playing group. After all, everything that went on, they can only deal with what's in front of them. And they did that outstandingly well in Pakistan.
Well, let's have a look at a coach in another part of the world. England have their first series coming up against New Zealand. First test match starts in Lords. We might get the prices on that very shortly as well, Tristan. But it's also representing the time for a new coach in there, Brendan McCullum, taking over. So it'd be interesting to get your thoughts on that, Brad. But first up, some markets around that, Tristan.
Yeah, so the series market at the moment has England slight favourites at $2.20, New Zealand $2.40, and the drawn series at $5. We got the draw no bet, 185, 195, England slight favourites. And in the first test, it's at Lords on Thursday night. It kicks off, so we'll get all of our extra markets up over the next 24 hours. But at the moment, England slight favourites in that first match, 232, New Zealand 294, and the draw 330. So a very balanced series. It looks like it's going to be a good one from a viewing point of view and also a punting point of view.
Wow, I'll take some of that. New Zealand, I think, are a really well-balanced cricket team. They're the current world champions in this form of the game. And England, to me, is still unknown. They've picked a few different style of players. Harry Brooks, one who's had an unbelievable year for Yorkshire. He's dominated with the bat. I think, hold on to your seats here. Brendan McCullum's a naturally aggressive player, and I think we're going to see some teething problems to start with. To try to get the identity of the way they want to play, and there's a difference between creating identity of let's play eyes up cricket, let's move the game forward and have that attacking mindset. But you've also got to have the players to implement those plans, and that to me is going to be a big one. If they've got the players to adapt the style, I think Brendan McCullum's going to want to play. So you've got Anderson and Broad, we've seen that have come back into the team. Is that a disruption? Is that a disruption to the player group? We know they're big personalities in the group. Is that a captain's pick? Is that the captain wanting his senior players around him that he feels comfortable with? Is that holding back the development of what Brendan McCullum's about? Would it be better if he had a fresh start or with a new group of players? So I think there's a lot of unknowns going into this Test match series. That's what surprised me, that England are favourites. I think New Zealand are a very, very classy team. They scrap. They all know their roles really well. So yeah, let's just hold on to our seats a bit and see how this Brendan McCullum era starts with this England cricket team.
So you like the 240 New Zealand at this point?
Yeah, I like New Zealand. Mate, they play well. They've got a team that complements those conditions over there. You got guys like Bolt and Southey who play huge roles with the Duke ball over there swinging it. You've got Kane Williamson, who had a bit of a disappointing IPL, actually. He didn't play much cricket leading in with the tennis elbow. I know he's been struggling for quite some time. So let's hope he's back to his best. But yeah, I see New Zealand red hot favourites.
So Trent Bolt just been playing in an IPL final, so he'll have to get across there. You would think he's not going to play in that first Test match, right? That starts in a couple of days' time. But let's go to the IPL. Before we get there, though, another very good season in the IPL for David Warner. A lot of speculation around whether David Warner should be allowed to captain a BBL side. Now, as per his ban from a couple of years ago from South Africa, he is not allowed to hold a leadership position. Does Cricket Australia need to revisit this, Brad?
100%. 100%. Like you've seen with guys like Steve Smith, he's allowed back into the leadership role. And I think the one thing with Big Bash cricket as well, we need as many box office players as we can at the moment. And David Warner is coming to the back end of his Test career. He's 35 now. And imagine if this was his last year of Test cricket and you had 2 good years of David Warner in Big Bash to captain a team. Imagine if he took over the Thunder out there where I know he's played some cricket. I think he's a really good thinker of the game. We've just recently seen in the IPL, he scored the most 50s again. He got 5 50s for his team, Delhi, in the IPL. So I think we really do need to revisit. I think he's a changed man. Now I think leadership would sit well with him. He's got a lot to offer the young kids. And another thing, straight away, as soon as you say that, Jimmy, you get excited about watching Big Bash. You get excited about watching, hang on a minute, David Warner's back. We know he's an aggressive player, but he's also a thinker of the game, and he'll move the game forward. He's brave enough to make big decisions. And I think we need a bit of that. We need a bit of that in the Big Bash. We need that star power back to attract more people into the game and stimulate everyone a bit who's watching it.
It's going to have an impact too, Tristan, on turnover. I mean, we're looking at this from a very specific point of view, but when you know that player of the caliber of David Warner's there, that's attractive from your point of view too, right?
Oh, absolutely. Like from our point of view, we've just gone from the IPL where it has the star power. It's got the blockbuster. It got the box office sort of impact. Now it's on at midnight in Australia, most of those games, and we're holding more money on the IPL than we're holding on the Big Bash, which I think is a it's not the be all and end all, but from my perspective, that's how I look at the metrics of things. And turnover on punting translates to eyeballs on screens and these sort of things. And you've got these stars. You've got David Warner, and as Had's touched on, we don't know how long he's going to be playing Test cricket for. He's 35 now, I think, and obviously still performing very, very well. But there's so many lucrative options there traveling the world, and if you can get him locked in as a captain when he's available at the moment, but maybe when he gravitates into a full-time T20 role, is that going to help you retain that player for a couple of years when he starts traveling the circuit?
Before we get to the IPL final, Brad, how long do you think, David, let's make an assumption that he plays Test cricket for another 12 months. I don't know whether that's right or wrong. How long after that period do you see him playing as a gun for hire?
Well, I just have a look at the moment. If you look at what's coming up in Test cricket, you've got the Ashes campaign, and I imagine he'd love to sign off then on winning an away Ashes. You got the 2020 World Cup here at home, which, mate, he'll be box office. He plays our conditions well. We're the defending champs. They got a 50-over World Cup, and after that, you've also got to then start building for the next cycle of World Cups, and you'd imagine he's not going to be around for that. So you could have in 2 seasons' time David Warner full time in the Big Bash, and how good would that be for the Australian fans? He's a World Cup winner. He would have played close to 100 Test matches, but whether you like him or you don't, he will get people in the gate. You turn up to watch David Warner play. And I think you need to revisit it. If that's something that needs to be revisited to get him back involved in the Big Bash, well I'm for it. You need your superstars. You need your rascals. You need the guys that the personalities, and he's all that.
Is he tactically sound enough to captain a T20 side?
100%. That's actually one of his strengths. He's very well planned, but working with him in the IPL, he asks for a lot of vision, and he knows a lot about the opposition players. But the thing I like most about him, and I think that it tracks from what I like to see in a captain, is his eyes up cricket. He'll be the world's best planned captain, but his strength to me is playing what's in front of him. And I think that's what you need. And I think the young kids, and I'm biased, I'd like him at one of the Sydney franchises because he helped develop out the New South Wales players. But I think the modern day kids would benefit from that as well. To having a captain out there who's brave enough to make decisions and move the game forward and always looking at a way to win. So his strength to me is his tactical nous.
I love the way you're getting a bit of rugby league phrasing coming into your cricket chat too. Eyes up cricket, which is fantastic. So well done on that, Bradley. What about the IPL final? First year in, the Titans win it against the Rajasthan Royals. The thing that struck, so well done to them. The thing that struck me about it, Bradley, and you've tipped us into a lot of great tips over the course of this tournament. I hope the TopSport listeners to this podcast have been taking advantage of them. Such a low-scoring final. Why?
Pressure. I think, Jimmy, I think that's the one thing in these games in the IPL. Sometimes the pressure can get to you on that big stage where you can play brave enough. But from a Rajasthan Royals point of view, Butler only got 39. It's as simple as that for them. He's come off an outstanding year. He scored 400s, which is a record in the IPL for the season. It was nearly a fairy tale too for Rajasthan. I've seen a lot of similarities with the 2008 Shane Warne team. The campaign built a little bit, this one, on playing that style of Shane Warne. He liked to play brave cricket and move the game forward. So I think to simplify it, Butler didn't score enough runs in the final, but you got to take your hats off to the Titans. They're a new franchise. Their whole setup, there's a lot that goes into building a team, and they took a big risk too on Hardik Pandya. He's never captained before. He's someone that I think enjoys being the leader of the team. He got 3 for 17 in the final. He got 34 as well with the bat just to get them over the line. So I think they deserve a lot of credit with building something from the ground up, them being brave enough to play the style of game that suited your captaincy. And I think that's what they did. They had Rashid Khan. We know who's box office in this form of the game, but a lot of credit has to go to the identity that Hardik Pandya created for this team and how relaxed he kept the environment.
Oh, for sure. And I think the one thing you touch on where that you've got the the pressure in a final, and we know how Josh Butler had been scoring so many runs throughout the regular season, and then when he does, he still got 39, which it's not like he went out there and failed, but when he doesn't go and score the 60 odd average it had been doing, the pressure then compounds on every other side. And just looking at the top lists of run scorers, so you got Josh Butler up there at the top for Rajasthan, and then Sampson, who comes in at 10th, where the Titans, you got 3 players there running from 4th to 6th. They've got a very balanced side, and even down the bottom of the order when the pressure would have been on, and you get guys that come out and put up their 30s and 40s and just ease that pressure. I think that's so key in any final, which no doubt you know about Hads, and unfortunately they just couldn't get it done last night. And
Hads, think about what's that mean now, because you told us a few weeks ago around what the new IPL deal is, and I've read some articles around it. It's basically ×2. Right, the next broadcast deal for them, which is quite incredible, right? But it means all the player salaries are ×2 as well. Who are the guys that you've seen perform in this IPL, and how important is that when it comes to rolling over for next year and recognising who's so give us who's going to be the guys, international and Indian players that are going to do really well out of this next IPL broadcast cycle?
I'll tell you, I'll give you one right now. Is Mitchell Starc.
Right.
Mitchell Starc didn't go in last auction, so Mitchell Starc will go in this auction. And it'll be interesting, Jimmy, at this time now, you've just finished your final. Teams will be doing a lot of their analytics around what worked well, what do we need next year, who to delist, who to keep, who are we going to target. And sometimes in these situations, and we seen it with Pat Cummins a few years ago, where KKR needed a fast bowler. So no matter what the auction process was, they were getting a fast bowler, and we've seen Paddy went for somewhere near 3 million. I think Mitchell Starc will be that person next auction. Interesting one for me was Miller. He had an outstanding year for the Titans. He had an average of 68. He scored 480 runs, but he was a low budget buy for the Titans. We've seen in the past he's had some really good seasons and some up and down. He's been in and out of teams, in and out of IPL and international teams with form. But the one thing they've done well is they've got the best out of him. And when he's going well, he's one of the best power hitters in the game. He's just been inconsistent, but they've found a way to get the best out of him. He won a lot of games also in the last over for the Titans, the close ones under pressure. So that to me shows someone who's been inconsistent in the past, is comfortable in their environment to express themselves. And in the end, he finished off the game with 32 not out off 19 balls, which he's done through the whole series. But he's one, when you're picking your list, you've got to find those, when you're planning, those little diamonds in the rough too to complement your superstars of the game. So Miller, to me, you've got Butler, who obviously gets player of the tournament, but mate, he won a lot of games for the Titans.
All right, that's something to look forward to, especially if your name's Mitchell Starc as well. So that's very good. I don't know, Tristan, what the market is for left-arm orthos that don't turn the ball. But anyway, something that you can work on there for the next IPL auction.
Yeah, I'm going to just try to do a little contra deal with the Gold Coast Titans to the Gujurat Titans, because there's our little bit of upside for our year 2022 for the Titans brand and the TopSport brand. So you never know. There might be an opportunity there.
Mate, your best option is to send Tino Fasua Malaawi into the auction as a power hitter and see how you go with that. Just manage that contract. Great work, boys. Another big week in cricket as always. Stay safe, and we'll do it again shortly.
Thanks, guys.
Keep it real.